While pretty much all normal raids in Final Fantasy XIV are pretty much easy enough that we should always succeed on them eventually, some of them are definitely harder than others. So here I have collected 10 of the hardest normal raids in the game as of 7.4, or the final raid patch of Dawntrail. Just to be clear, the ranking here is about normal raids, not Savage and not Alliance raids. And notably, the Coils of Bahamut are considered in a league above normal, but in some cases below Savage, which still means it is disqualified. This means the competition is between Alexander, Omega, Eden, Pandæmonium and Arcadion. That said, having looked through all of the existing available normal raids in the game, the criteria to be a top 10 contender is primarily the possibility of a somewhat average party, with some first-timers, wiping. Secondarily, if a fight has a mechanic that, while it might not wipe the party outright, has a tendency to kill many players, leading to very long battles. This does still mean that the top 10 may include a lot of mean mechanics that tend to catch players because it is their first time. And remember, this is simply my opinion, and I'm not meaning to try and make anyone feel bad by, for instance, finding a boss that didn't rank in the top 10 really hard. In fact, I would love to hear what your top 10 of hardest normal raids are in the comments. With that, let's get to it. Number 10. P10N. Pandæmonium's Pandæmonium. While it might not be quite known to wipe parties on the regs, it has the necessary tools to do it. Silk Spit can cause chaos in positioning and at times can lead to deaths. The poison goop separating the arenas hurts a ton, and the bridges are just slim enough that it isn't uncommon for someone to accidentally slip into the goop. On top of that, less routined players may feel the need to rush when touchdown comes, increasing the chance of hitting the goop. Harrowing Hell not being accompanied by anything else of course means the healers can focus on that, which makes it less brutal than you'd otherwise expect, but it, combined with the distance of the knockback on the final hit, has the capacity to clear several players right off the field, at the very least on your first go. If the team ends up on the back foot, the regularly occurring stacks can press the advantage. Pandæmonium itself represents the bottom of the top 10 as a boss that mostly muscles a win with sheer force rather than messing you up with a specific mechanic. Number 9. O11N. Omega's... Omega. What a funny coincidence. This one has 3 standout mechanics that cause problems. The first one, probably unsurprisingly, is Larboard-Starboard Wave Cannon, a 1-2 double half-room cleave that also spins the boss during it. For many English players especially, the naming of the mechanic is the problem, as most of these kinds of mechanics would just say left and right, adding now an extra bit of brain lag to interpret what is being said. On top of this, the 1-2 combo spinning the boss makes it even more likely you get hit twice in the confusion rather than just once. And, while Omega doesn't quite have the amount of stack markers to follow through on such an advantage, its Tank Buster, Mustard Bomb, hits very hard, which can break through the party's defenses when put under pressure. The third thing is effectively the whole ad phase. While the ad phase itself is not that hard, it is actually a strict DPS check that gladly distributes damage down debuffs from mistakes, and has ways to get players killed for just incorrect positioning. The phase also culminates in a moment where the party must use their bonus action, which itself is no issue, but you do need somewhere around 2 or 3 players to do it, or you wipe, which, let's just say, I have been on the brink of wiping, simply due to players not really caring to press the button. Number 8. A12N. Alexander's... it's actually Alexander. I swear this is a coincidence. This one has 4 standout mechanics. The first, much simpler one is, frankly, the tank busters on this boss hit very hard, relatively speaking, and sometimes lack of healer awareness can lead to a tank dying to just that. The second thing is temporal stasis. Not that being paused is any threat of its own, but the somewhat confusing markers all coming in at once, with the single target markers threatening to kill players for assisting with the stack marker, can quickly cause a lot of chaos that can lead to lacking players for either future temporal stasis casts or other upcoming mechanics. The third thing is indeed one of those mechanics. time gate, where you need 4 players to leave the arena to help with an ad phase, or you die, which also doubles as a DPS check. Of course, you don't need to send 4 players, but you are risking a wipe for very little gain. This mechanic can lead to sketchy situations simply due to the wrong players going in, and suddenly you have no healer on the outside. The fourth thing worth mentioning is the mandatory tank LB3, although this is simply a do or die thing and isn't hard to do, but it is worth mentioning since we are here anyway. Number 7. E7N, Eden's Iconoclasm. Birds! While this fight has a few different threatening mechanics, I think we can all agree that they all pale before words of motion, whether it's just lines of birds or the colored ones. Often, being hit by 2 waves of birds in a row can be lethal, and once the fight is underway, you do have to pay attention to the birds and dodge around, often dodging back and forth to avoid being hit at all, and it is just punishing enough that disrespecting the mechanic likely leads to your death. And the sheer frequency at which this one mechanic is used can put pressure on an unknowing team and potentially overwhelm them once key players are taken out. Now, take note that number 6 is a spoiler for patch 7.4. Number 6. M9N, Arcadion's Vamp Fatale. The fight features an ad intermission that, for the more casual player, can actually be very tight to overcome. At least for now. Take note, this fight is extremely new at the time of this video's making. It also features pillar soaks that turn into ads, and at least one of said soaks are significantly out of melee range and totally missable, which can lead to death. Finally, as the fight progresses, the raid wides and multi-stacks do gradually more damage, which does reach amounts where they threaten death if players have made any mistakes and so have vulnerability stacks. That said, overall, the fight is, surprisingly, very above board and fair, with her mechanics not feeling like you were supposed to know beforehand to be able to avoid most of the mechanics. Number 5. A11N, Alexander's Cruise Chaser. What mostly makes this fight difficult is, ironically, the fact that some mechanics don't play out quite in a predictable order due to HP thresholds, and also because some of the mechanics are simply not super well indicated. For instance, did you know the flare marker in phase 1 targets the off tank every time and does less party-wide damage based on how far the tank ran away? Yeah, me neither. Another example is that when you enter phase 2, if your party's damage output was low, then in addition to Cruise Chaser performing limit cut, 4 orbs spawn. And this is a DPS check. If Cruise Chaser comes around to using Eternal Darkness, the permanent bleed effect, while an orb still exists, you die. The result is a fight where there is just enough chaos that the boss steals wipes to the most random things, which somehow makes it more threatening than the fights prior to this one, due to seeming less fair as a result. Take note that number 4 is a spoiler for patch 7.4. Number 4. M12N, the Lindwurm of the Arcadion. Filled with mechanics dealing plenty of damage on top of being a bit difficult to read on the first go. Bring down the house-breaking parts of the arena also adds extra weight to these slightly hard to predict mechanics, and this being overlapped with Grotesque Query leads to a mechanical combo that can wipe out the party all on its own. Weirdly shaped arena, followed by player-angled directional knockbacks, can be immune if you remember to. Into a stack marker while also needing to dodge a cone that will be fired across most of the arena. And then followed by player-angled cone AoEs that absolutely can lead to players hitting each other. Ravenous Reach, both the cone itself and the blobs that spawn afterwards, also both can just be threatening all on their own due to the damage they can deal. Admittedly, the fight may seem harder than expected due to being new, as well as gear-related reasons, but I do think this is the right spot for it considering the challenge it poses. Number 3. M7N, Arcadion's Brute Abombinator. There's something to be said that when this raid tier came out, this boss was used as evidence that proper difficulty was coming back into normal raids. What tends to catch players on this one is simply the damage of Brutal Impact being surprisingly high and getting caught out of position for Stoneringer. Other mechanics like Glower Power and Lashing Lariat near the end of the fight can also snipe a kill due to misreading the boss, or the party being too clumped up together leading to overlaps. There's also something to be said about the amount of the fight that is unchanged from the Savage version, where mainly just a mechanic here and there has been slightly adjusted or one thing has been added, notably the tethers on Savage. Number 2. M8N, Arcadion's Howling Blade. In a strange twist in contrast to Brute Abombinator, what makes this one challenging is actually the mechanics that are distinctly different from their Savage counterparts, leading to memes about how Howling Blade Normal actually has the harder version of some of these mechanics. The first one that springs to mind is Beckon Moonlight in Phase 2, simply because, while it lacks the stacks and spreads of Savage, it goes a lot faster, which tends to catch players off guard, and can sneak a kill sometimes. The second example is Terrestrial Titans, the rock pillars, where on Savage it is a single pair and there is only 2 patterns, easily distinguishable from each other. The normal version has 3 pillars that angle in a less exact way. Obviously, they are still manageable to determine the safe spots from, but the order of safe spots is a lot more random, and while you can probably establish a system to find the safe spot consistently, that will probably take a few runs to accomplish. Wolf's Rain being always the cone, but once Phase 2 starts, also always accompanied by Wolf Head line AoEs, also makes for a spike in difficulty for a normal raid boss. And speaking of the Wolf Heads, a somewhat common place for parties to run into trouble is the ad phase with the 2 Wolf Heads, as the overlapping line AoEs and stack markers can lead players to be afraid of stacking properly, leading to deaths or even a wipe. I think it is also worth mentioning the damage of the Tracking Tremors party stack is very high for a normal raid encounter, which allows Howling Blade to somewhat reliably capitalize on any deaths he manages to cause with his many pretty clear but easily messed up mechanics. Before we get to number 1, it's not another Arcadion, trust me. I would like to highlight some honorable mentions. I would also like to mention that out of the 60 normal raid bosses that could feasibly qualify for this list, I had reason to consider nearly half of them for one reason or another. So I want to reiterate that if you feel like a boss is missing, it is very possible that I would agree with you. But unfortunately, we don't have 11 spots. Now for the honorable mentions. First, A4N, Alexander's Manipulators Nizi. The Judgment Hammer thingy can be exceptionally devastating to a party in an instant, but it is simply incredibly unlikely for it to wipe a party, simply because the mechanic tends to come up so late that whatever skeleton crew remains if it goes wrong can still bring home victory. The second honorable mention is E10N, Eaton's Shadowkeeper. While not super capable of wiping a party, still puts fear into many a player's hearts simply because of how confusing the shadow mechanics feel when you haven't quite figured it out yet. The third honorable mention is M2N, Arcadion's Honeybee Lovely, specifically thanks to her alarm pheromones mechanic, specifically the one where they target player locations randomly. This mechanic is notorious for being included basically as is in the Savage version. Obviously, the Savage version is more punishing, but it is worth mentioning that with everything else going on, this mechanic can sometimes get Honeybee a victory, mopping up whoever's left. The fourth honorable mention is O12N, Omega F and Omega M, mainly due to how easily they can sometimes wipe the party just like that with the spread plus knockback combo when the bosses spawn in. Mainly, if not entirely, because of the knockback. And the final honorable mention goes to M5N, Arcadion's Dancing Green, primarily due to Frogtorage. This mechanic either hits as quote-unquote hot wings or quote-unquote hot tail and is very manageable to read. Besides, being hit by just one of them is survivable, meaning that hot wings is basically whatever. However, hot tail, meaning when the two Frogtorage squares overlap, can instantly kill anything not a tank and can sometimes sneak a victory for Dancing Green out of nowhere if you don't pay attention. And this leads us to number 1, the hardest normal raid as of the end of Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail's normal raids, at least, in my opinion. It is A2N, the Alexander Mob Rush. No, obviously it isn't. I'm kidding. It's A9N, Alexander's Refurbisher 0. What makes this boss stand out is the simple fact that the boss has not one, but 2 instant wipe checks. The first check is essentially if at any point Refurbisher gets fully fixed by consuming too much scrap, which can happen by ignoring the scrap adds too much, or by not killing the Full Metal Faust in time. The other check is if said Full Metal Faust, while still alive, as much as touches the lava with as much as a pinky toe. Boom, you're dead. While less lethal, the wide cone-y scrap line can build up a lot of damage on the party if not handled correctly, and the same can be said about Scrap Burst if players don't hide behind the Scrap Comet to dodge the damage. Given a bit more power creep, maybe 8.0 AO? It is actually possible that a more average party can outright skip needing to kill the Full Metal Faust by simply killing Refurbisher before it spawns, or while it is alive, and, to be blunt, if that becomes the norm, then Refurbisher 0 would not make this list at all, as, while it could fully rebuild off the smaller adds, this generally does just not happen in the time of an average pull. However, speaking of which, it's also worth mentioning the Refurbisher becomes stronger as it consumes more scrap, so ignoring the adds could eventually lead to problems that are more rare. Do you agree with my picks? Do you feel like I overlooked a normal raid you feel was really hard? Naturally, this is just my opinion, so I would love to hear yours, and I do want to reiterate from the start of the video that, indeed, most normal raids are very manageable, which means what really qualifies our raid to be considered hardest is its ability to maybe get a wipe out of you. Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Twitch or Ko-Fi. Links in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, raids generally don't have an item level sync beyond the general level-based sync, which typically means that as time passes, the first tier of an expansion tends to be a lot easier than the last due to item level differences. This also means that for a normal raid to be hard in the long term, it tends to rely on a strict mechanic that you have to respect, or you die. Some fights, just off memory, that were seemingly pretty tough when they were new, but are not as hard anymore, include P3N, Pandæmonium's Phoenix, and E4N, Eden's Titan.